Live. Welcome to the Grassroots Army Podcast. This platform is for common sense people looking for up-to-date, accurate, and truthful information without the hot garbage corporate media bias. The power of one can lead to the power of many. You never know what small act that you may say or do that may literally change the lives of millions tomorrow. And don't you ever think that you can't make a difference, because you can. Good morning, my fellow Michiganders. Good morning, my fellow Americans. Welcome to the Grassroots Army Podcast. I'm, of course, your host, Garrett Soldano. And what I have on here today is newly announced gubernatorial candidate Tom Leonard. Welcome to the show, sir.
Hey, thanks, buddy. And I'm sorry we're a couple minutes late. I got to tell you, I don't know that I've had many problems in the last 10 to 15 years logging into Facebook. I'm coming onto your show. We have problems. So my question is, are they still targeting you, man? What's going on?
I hope not. Actually, Facebook is starting to get a little better every single day ever since Elon Musk bought X. And so they're allowing us to talk about things and post videos about things that we never obviously were able to before. So hopefully they're not still attacking me, but who knows?
That's all good.
Point. So you made it. We're here. And my goodness gracious, the first question, Tom, especially with your history in politics, is why the heck are you running, man?
Yeah, and listen, this is very simple. Hannah, Thomas, and Danny. That's my 8-year-old, my 5-year-old, and my 1-year-old. And I've been very clear about this, man. The most staggering statistic that I believe Michigan is facing right now is the fact that the first 2 decades of this century, we were 49 out of 50 for population growth. Now, there's a whole host of reasons why that's the case. And I'm looking forward to talking about that. But the bottom line is this, man, as you know, as a young father, somebody that's got 3 young kids, especially being the father of a little girl who has my heart, the last thing in the world I want is for 15 years from now, her to come to me and say, Daddy, I would love to stay here, but I got to get on a plane and I've got to move to another state because there's better opportunity. And like you and every father and mother out there, who in the world wants to get on a plane and fly hundreds of miles to see their grandkids and kids? That's why I'm doing this. We've got one opportunity. We got to get this thing turned around, and we've got the plan to do it.
And you hit some things. Some of the things you said just gave me the chills. And I think a lot of people in the state of Michigan are feeling the very same thing that you are.
Sure.
We love this state. It's a fantastic state. But holy cow, people are actually talking about now the options of moving out to the freedom states.
And listen, man, I mean, not to dwell too much on it, but you think about it, we are losing population to Ohio. I think it was 2 years ago, Ohio was the one state that took the most residents or citizens from the state of Michigan. I mean, come on, we've all driven through Ohio, okay? I got nothing against my fellow Buckeyes, but my goodness, Ohio is not Michigan, man. Michigan is by far one of the most beautiful states in the country. We should be taking citizens from Ohio. We should be taking children from Ohio.
Yeah, and that's the U of M coming out of you, right?
You got it. But even just the state as a whole, I mean, my goodness, I love this state. It's the most beautiful state. We got the hardest workers. I mean, we should be crushing it.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And it is a crowded field right now. We have a lot of people running. We have some potential people that are thinking about still running, like Kevin Rinke. Perry Johnson is rumored. Even Tudor Dixon is still on the fence with some things. But it's very crowded. And what I'm concerned with is, again, I think we have a great lineup of candidates all running for the same position. And now, there's only one person, Kevin, that is announced for Attorney General. I don't think anyone is announced for Secretary of State as of yet. How does that playing field going to look here in the future? Because those, obviously, you've run for Attorney General twice in the delegate race. Those are some very important seats, and we have to bring great quality candidates to that. So why did you think, okay, I want to run for governor after losing in the Attorney General race twice?
Yeah, for me, it was these issues or these problems that we were solved or that need to be resolved and solved that I know, as important as that Attorney General race is, and we have seen how important that race is, especially given the disaster that we've had over the last 7 years in this state. The bottom line is many of these problems cannot be resolved through the Attorney General. It's got to be through the governor signing legislation. And you look at some of these statistics. I mean, it's not just the population growth. I mean, we are 49 out of 50 for unemployment right now. We're bottom 10 for income growth, bottom 10 for education. Less than 40% of our children can read right now at a proficient level. But let me give you a couple others that a lot of people are not talking about right now. Did you know that a third of our counties are considered maternity deserts? That means they don't even have a doctor to deliver babies. Did you know that 20% of our state's population suffers from some type of mental health issue? That's 1.7 Michiganders, and half of them are not getting treatment. There's not one psychiatric bed in the UP. 8% of our high school students have said at some point they have tried committing suicide. You look at law enforcement right now, our prosecutors' offices and local police chiefs were recently polled, and half of them have said they don't have enough prosecutors hired or enough police officers hired to provide basic services for our citizens. So there are so many issues that we have to resolve. I looked at that and said, my goodness, it's only going to be, going to be accomplished through the governor working through the legislature. But second, I looked at, I listened to a lot, I traveled the state listening to hundreds of people over the last 4 to 5 months. And what I saw was there wasn't a candidate that was really bringing forth a policy agenda with a positive vision. And the bottom line is your average voter. When I talk to your average voter, they say, listen, Tom, I'm not looking, sorry, I got a little fly there. I'm not looking to look back. I want to know, what are we going to do to ensure that our kids can read? What are we going to do to bring people back? What are we going to do to grow incomes? I want to see somebody with a real positive policy agenda. And that's what we did. And I'll say this. I told my team, we're going to bring the Dan Campbell approach. Now, we all know that Dan Campbell, a few years ago, when he took that podium and he gave that first press conference, he looked into that camera and he didn't dwell on 2 or 3 decades of failure. He said, by gosh, we've got to fix this thing, and we're going to do it putting together the right team with a lot of grit, a lot of determination, a lot of hard work. And if Dan Campbell turned around the Lions, we can turn around the state of Michigan, but it's going to take a lot of hard work, and we're going to have to do it working together. I nor anybody can do it alone. And any politician that stands before you and says, I'm going to do it, they're not being truthful to themselves and not being truthful to you. We've got to do it working together.
Amen. And I agree with you 100%. We have to have somebody with a vision who actually can get things done, because I think a lot of people are just kind of burned out and frustrated. Obviously, today's political climate is very polarizing, and we need some kind of folks in here with some leadership skills and the grit. We're talking about the Lions and the vision to do it. You spent 6 years, right, in the legislature, including Speaker of the House, obviously. So some people might look at that and say, oh man, he's part of the swamp. Other people like myself say, hey, he has experience in Lansing. Okay. So how does your on the ground experience in Lansing, we're talking about, compare to some of the other candidates, kind of like John James, who has military experience, very small business experience, but really no background in legislating here in the state of Michigan? What's going to differentiate you from that candidate?
Yeah. So, before I went to the legislature, I was a prosecutor in the city of Flint. It was the best job I ever had. And I'd love to talk about that more as this goes on. But I was a drug prosecutor, got to go out on the streets with the officers. It was an incredible experience. Worked a couple years in the Attorney General's office, and then was recruited by my local senator and sheriff to run for the legislature back in 2012. But in terms of separation, I would say a couple of things. Okay. And I know, 2017 was an eternity, but I'll give you a couple of examples of things that I did to demonstrate that I was not afraid to take on Lansing. And then I'll talk about a few accomplishments. But first and foremost, don't forget, if everybody remembers the late and great Gary Glenn, who was a dear friend of mine. This guy he was Mr. Conservative. Okay.
Great guy.
I appointed him to be chair of the Energy Committee.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, I took a lot of heat by doing that, because he was not friendly to the utilities at the time. But I knew that we needed somebody like Gary who was going to hold not just the utilities, but hold everybody accountable and really push that free market agenda. I was not afraid to do that. Second, you may recall the very first bill that we introduced when I was speaker, and I want to make, and this is why I love these podcasts, because I can actually flush this out. It's not like an 8-minute get your talking points out. When I became speaker, I took the position that I was not going to introduce any legislation personally, because I felt, as the person that ran the chamber, I didn't want anytime a bill went up, if it had my name on it, I didn't want anybody to feel compelled that they were going to have to vote for it. So I just took the position I was going to let other members introduce the legislation. So we had the legislation introduced to basically lower the state income tax at the time from 4.35 to 3.9 and start to phase it out to 0. Okay. And I got to tell you, Garrett, in 2017, I thought that was going to be the easiest thing in the world to pass. I thought every Republican was going to want to cut taxes. And we shot this thing out of committee. We got it onto the floor, and we were a few votes short because we had 12 Republican members that said, I'm not going to vote for that. And most speakers, over the course of 30, 40 years would have just said, hey, I don't have the votes. They would have went home. And guess what? Those 12 members all would have had a pass. They could have gone to their districts and said, hey, I don't know why the speaker didn't pass it. He just didn't get the votes. I'm sorry, I don't know what to tell you. And I sat with those members and I said, listen, some of you have actually put on your website that you want to cut taxes. I'm giving you the opportunity to do it. You're not doing it. But most importantly, I've got a lot of members that want to go on the record saying that they voted to cut and try to eliminate the state income tax. So I put that bill up, and I don't think folks thought I was going to do it. And we recorded it. Now, I will tell you, I took a lot of heat for that because the Lansing establishment, a lot of the editorials the following Sunday, the speaker's unorganized. He doesn't know how to count votes. No, we counted votes. We knew we were a couple votes short, but I wanted to hold members accountable. But most importantly, I wanted to give those conservative members a voice. There had not been a speaker in times past that had done something like that. But in terms of accomplishments, and I think this is something when we go out on the campaign trail, we're going to have a big, broad, whole host of issues that we can talk about. So let's talk about, on what we consider, the conservative or the MAGA side of things. Okay. I believe to this day, I'm the only legislative leader that has passed constitutional carry through the chamber. We passed through Tom Barrett, who was a phenomenal member of mine. Thank God he's in Congress now. We made paper ballots the law of the state of Michigan. That didn't used to be the law. We passed making English the official language of the state of Michigan. Okay. But we also passed some huge economic things. I mean, for 3 decades, the state wanted to pass teacher pension reform. We had this huge, debt and liability on our books. We were actually able to get teacher pension reform through and onto the governor's desk. But also, I'll say this: when I was a prosecutor, it used to be the law of the state that if somebody committed a crime, they only had, if they had a felony and they had a misdemeanor on their record, they couldn't get them expunged. And I looked at this, and I was always tough on crime, but I thought, if we're going to let somebody out of prison and we want to get them assimilated back into the workforce, we can't tell them because of one bad night you can never get a job again. Now, I'm not talking about murderers and sex offenders. I'm talking about people that committed property crimes. So I introduced the bill to expand expungements in the state of Michigan to give these people hope, but also driver responsibility fees. You may recall back in the early 2000s, our legislature passed these ridiculous fees that they'd imposed, I call, on the working poor. And basically, there were people who were having, $500,000 fees accumulating every single year. They had no hope of getting a driver's license. I said, that's wrong. We got 350,000 of our citizens can't get a driver's license, 75,000 of them in the city of Detroit. Let's eliminate this. And, I had to work hard negotiating with then Governor Snyder, but we got it done. And we gave 350,000 residents in this state hope by giving them their driver's licenses back. So we've got a whole host of accomplishments that I think we're going to be able to take on this campaign trail.
I mean, that's just, to me, like a lot of common sense. Like, if people can drive, guess what? They can drive to work. They're driving to work. Yes. They're stimulating the economy. They're paying their taxes, which is going to help the state. Let's get into the budget, obviously, which has been very bloated over the past several years. Yep. Back several years ago, the exact numbers, I'm sure, from 50 to 80 something $billion. Yep. And you mentioned state income tax. And I know some other candidates are running on eliminating the state income tax, not a little, everything. What is your kind of view on that?
So one, I believe it's something we need to do. And again, I have a history, when I was speaker, that was House Bill 4001. So it was our top priority at the time. So certainly something that I support 100%. But second, and I will say the one tax, I mean, listen, I the consultants that do polling, I respect them. I respect the polls that come back, but I'm going to tell you right now that to me, the best poll, and I bet you would agree because you've been out there, you've done this. There is no greater poll in the world than going out there and talking to the citizens of the state. And I'm going to tell you this. Most of them, if not all of them, yeah, they want to pay lower income taxes. Okay. But the number one tax I hear about, I bet at least 10-1, property taxes.
Correct.
They want something done with their property taxes. And you think about how important it would be if we could do some type of property tax reform to lower or eliminate the property taxes in the state of Michigan. I mean, think about this for a moment. If we want to bring kids, or let's call them young adults, back to Michigan, or we want to keep them here, we already have an affordable housing crisis here in this state. I mean, over the last 5 years, rents up 40%, average housing costs $100,000. Now, if they go to purchase a home, that property tax cap has been taken off, and those property taxes are going to jump astronomically. Okay. So these young couples, they're purchasing a home. Think of the stress it puts on their marriage. When they buy that home, in 50, 60, 70% of their income is going to taxes in a mortgage. No more date nights, man. No more vacations. But guess what? They also can't start a family. Or if they do, there's going to be a lot of stress. We can't do that to our young people, but also our senior citizens, man. I'm talking to senior citizens on a fixed income. They're saying, Tom, I can't keep up with the property taxes. We've got to do something here. I thought the home that I was going to be able to retire in, I'm going to have to sell, and I don't know what I'm going to do. So when it comes to taxes, man, if I could wave a magic wand and get it done, property taxes, I believe right now is where it's at. Again, I support eliminating the income tax, but as I listen to people right now, they want something done with property taxes now.
I would agree with that. And obviously, Carla Wagner circulating her Axe the Michigan tax petition, which on socials, it seems like it's picking up some speed. So I don't know where their signature count is, but it would be interesting if she gets that through. Obviously, you would be for voting for that
I am for, yes, I am for definitely lowering property taxes and hopefully phasing them out, here in the state. I just, again, when you look at property taxes too, I mean, philosophically, again, this is a big economic problem and burden. Okay. But philosophically, you look at property taxes. I mean, listen, isn't it a fundamental right, a constitutional right, that we have a right in this country to be property owners?
Yeah.
And
you don't really own it.
Nobody owns property. No, you don't own property in the state of Michigan. I mean, some people look at you and go, oh, that's extreme. Well, I would say this. Try going a few years without paying your property taxes. Find out what happens.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You'll find out you rent from the government.
Absolutely. You don't own anything. You're leasing everything. And I would agree with that too. The property tax is huge. And I just saw that Governor DeSantis is starting a process of eliminating, I think, property tax down there. And he's already eliminated state income tax. If I was him, I would have like an entry fee for the state. If you wanted to move down here, you would get taxed because everybody and their mother is trying to move down there. And that's the way they could probably get a little bit more revenue. Let me hit on just a few topics that you kind of hit on a little bit. Is with constitutional carry. Obviously, you're pro-constitutional carry. Are you against the red flag laws?
Yes. Go to and I say this. Most will say they'll come in here and they'll say, "Well, look at the Second Amendment. We have a right to keep and bear arms." We do. But I always go to Article 1, Section 6 of the state constitution. For any of your viewers right now, if they get a chance today, go Google, go look it up, Article 1, Section 6, because you know how the left with the Second Amendment, they'll always say, well, that was hundreds of years ago and we had certain types of guns and it doesn't mean that. Well, in 1963, Article 1, Section 6 of the state constitution was put in place, and it could not be more clear that we have a right to keep and bear arms in this state. And I don't know how, again, mental health, and I'd love to get into mental health issues, at some point in this conversation. Mental health issues have always been a big priority of mine, but you can't let that violate people's constitutional rights. And when you look at Article 1, Section 6, I don't know how you pass things like red flag laws without violating that section of the state constitution.
Yeah, agree. I mean, and that's where it's in our little Democrat, far left utopian society that they live in. Obviously we don't want folks to have access that they're going to do horrible things to society. And that can be
absolutely not. And
that's what
I'm sorry. I was going to say, you and I having this conversation, at some point, somebody from the left, they're going to snip it and they're going to say, hey, Tom and Garrett Soldano, they think the mentally ill people ought to be able to have firearms. No, that's not the case.
Correct.
We need to get these people help and treatment, but we've got a foundation. We have a constitution that we have to protect and preserve. And again, if you go to Article 1, Section 6 of the state constitution, it makes it clear that that right is fundamental.
Yeah. Amen. This is a personal issue with me. I've asked every person that has come on. Day one, Tom, I'm a healthcare professional in the state of Michigan. Governor Whitmer, back in 2020 in June, during the George Floyd garbage, passed implicit bias training, calling all healthcare professionals literally racist, that we're allowing our subconscious racism to basically decide what type of care that we're going to give our patients. And so every 2 years, we have to take 2 hours of continuing ed credits of implicit bias training. Will you get rid of that hot garbage?
Yes, 100%. And listen, it's not just personal to you, buddy. Look at these results that just came out on the no confidence vote for the state police colonel. I mean, Garrett, I've never seen any situation anywhere in business or politics anywhere where somebody got, I think it was a 98.5% vote of no confidence. I mean, that is crazy. And as I've been talking, again, I was a former prosecutor, so I've got a lot of former trooper friends that I get to chat with. I've spoken to many of them, and most of that vote centered around exactly what you are talking about, this implicit bias training that's been put in the state police. And listen, let me say this about our police officers, okay? And again, I love these larger and lengthier conversations. I told you at the beginning of this conversation, I was a prosecutor. I got to go out on the streets with the officers, okay? I'm going to tell you right now, I was with dozens of officers. I read hundreds, if not thousands of police reports, okay? I never saw a police officer of any color or of any age say they were going to arrest somebody or treat somebody differently because of the color of their skin, okay? And for us to say that all of our officers or our troopers have this implicit, they're implicitly, they're racist. I mean, you completely crush morale within that department. That's what we've seen with the state police. So what I've said is we need a governor that's going to hit this head on and say, listen, there is no doubt when you look at the facts and the stats and figures of our state, okay, there is no doubt that the black male population is less than 10% of our state. And yet the black males make up, I believe it's half of our prison population. Okay. That is a staggering statistic, but that's not because we have racist officers out there. You look at the years of this education problem we've had, and that's why I focus so hard on third grade reading. Okay. Only 11% of the third graders in Detroit public schools can read at a proficient level. And I've been very clear. As a prosecutor, I saw this. If a child drops out of school because they're illiterate, you create a pipeline to a welfare check or a prison cell. So instead of looking at those staggering, statistics that we have for our prisons and saying, well, we're going to go in and tell officers that they're racist, that's how we're going to fix this. No, let's get to the root of the problem. Let's get to our education system. And let's help these kids read so we don't have this continued problem 20, 30, 40 years from now.
Yes. Kevin Rinke not only ran on education in his last run, but he's also talking about it right now. He's very passionate about it. What is your plan to fix that problem right there? The reading. What is your deal?
So this is why I love our system of federalism, this nation, and these 50 states, these laboratories of experimentation. Okay. Because when something doesn't work in one state, you can say, I'm not going to touch that. And when something works great, you can say, let's go steal that idea, man. Okay. I say, look no further than the Mississippi Miracle in Mississippi. Yeah. Okay. So what happened there? And the reason I love how successful they've been is because anytime we have these education debates, it seems like every time the left, they want to say, well, it's more money, more money, more money. Okay. You look at Mississippi. They are one of the bottom 5 poorest states in the country, okay? And I believe they're bottom 5 in regards to what they spend on education every year, okay? 10 years ago, They were 49 out of 50 for third grade reading scores. They passed the right legislation, and I'll get into that, but they passed the right legislation. And within 10 years, their reading scores are now top 10 in the country. That's why they call it the Mississippi Miracle, because they did it with the right policies. They didn't have to go in and focus on the funding front. So what did they do? They focused on earlier assessment. So they made certain that kindergartners, first graders, second graders, and third graders, they were being assessed 3 times a year so we could readily determine which children needed assistance and if they were falling behind. Okay. Number 2, targeted support with high quality tutors. Okay. So they did invest in high quality tutors that they could put in these classrooms. They let the teachers teach, and the kids that were falling behind, they made certain that they had high quality teachers that could assist these students. Number 3, and man, this is a bold move. And I don't think many people on the campaign trail are going to want to take this, are going to want to take this step. Mississippi did it. It worked. And it's something we have to do. We can't just pass kids along who can't read and say, well, it's somebody else's problem. If they can't read at a proficient level, we've got to keep them in the third grade until they can. Because listen, you spend the first years learning to read, and then you read to learn. You can't send a kid along that can't read and say, well, we're going to expect you to read to learn. But the most important thing that Mississippi did, and it's the most important thing that we're going to have to focus on when we do this, if we're going to put these bold initiatives in place, then we have to empower parents, and they have to be part of this process. So we can't live in a world where the legislature passes a bill and says, well, we're going to have all this targeted support. We're going to hold these kids back if they can't read. But guess what? There's going to be no communication or support for the parents. We're not going to empower them in this process. No, there needs to be clear communication. They need to be part of this process. These tutors need to be working with these parents. And listen, if a kid's behind and they need to go to summer school, we need to ensure that there's resources available that can assist those children. So that's what Mississippi did. It's a great platform. I think it's something we need to adopt here.
Well, I mean, I think that is absolutely fantastic. I mean, if it's working in some other state, why wouldn't we take what's working? I mean, that's to me is just, again, common sense. Hey, this is working in Mississippi. And it's funny because you and I come from the same generation where back when we were younger, everybody talked about how horrible Mississippi and how horrible Florida schools were. You didn't want to go. Now, fast forward to today, and it's totally switched. And yep. I never thought that we would be where we're at. It just kind of creeped up on us. And now it's our reality. And the most powerful picture, and you've seen this, shared around social media, is that graph where it shows our spending and their performance. I mean, it's a V graph. I mean, spending's out of control on education, and our performance continues to go down because they're bloating the administration, right?
Well, and here's another thing we've got to resolve. I mean, I mentioned we passed teacher pension reform a few years ago, and unfortunately the legislature walked that back a couple of years, last year. I think it was as they were heading into lame duck. But you look at this issue we have with teacher pensions, and again, we've got to focus on these issues, man. So when I graduated high school, okay, the teacher pension liability was I think it was around $240 million. Okay. It's now a $30 billion problem because of mismanagement for decades. But I'll tell you what's staggering, and I bring this up to business owners. And listen, man, you're a business owner. Let me ask you this. What would happen right now? What would happen tomorrow if you woke up and you found out that over 20% of your payroll had to be dedicated to a pension fund because of past mistakes? Would you still be in business?
No, absolutely not.
Over 20% of our schools' payroll is going to a teacher pension fund that has been mismanaged for years. So this is something we've got to resolve this issue too. And I've said this to teachers. I'm like, listen, I believe that great teachers ought to be paid more. Okay. I believe in merit pay. If you're a great teacher and you're crushing it, let's give you a big bonus. Let's give you a big pay raise. But if you're not performing, then like anywhere else, we got to get rid of you. Okay. But I tell the great teachers this. I'm like, listen, I would love as governor to give you a great pay raise or give you a great bonus if you're performing well. But if over 20% of the school's payroll is going to a pension fund and it's never going into the classroom, I nor no governor is going to be able to do that. So we've got to get that one resolved as well so we can get more money into the classroom.
How do you even resolve that, Tom? Like that is so complicated, so in depth. I mean, where do you even start with that?
Yeah. So it was, so when Rick Snyder came in 2011, there was a similar problem with healthcare liabilities in the education system. Okay. And to this day, I wasn't there in 2011. So I don't know why they chose to really focus on the healthcare liabilities over the pension liabilities. But within 5 years, they had, I believe the healthcare, I have to go look at the facts, but I believe the healthcare liabilities, I think it was around a $23 billion problem within 5 years, by dedicating further resources, by taking surpluses and paying that down, but also going to the teachers and saying, hey, we're going to create a system. If you want lifetime healthcare, we got to have you pitch in a little bit more. And I believe it was 3%. And within 5 years, they were able to get those liabilities completely down to zero. So it's just going to take the dedication and focus on doing this. I mean, just a couple of years ago, our state had a $9.2 billion surplus.
Yeah.
Imagine if they had said, you know what, we're going to dedicate a good portion of that to this $30 billion teacher pension problem. We'd be able to get more money into the classrooms right now. 9.2 billion wouldn't have fixed it, but my goodness, it would have been a great start.
Yeah. I mean, again, that just seems like the most logical kind of start with this. You've been pretty vocal about having transparency, the core of your campaign, pushing for FOIA.
Yep.
To apply, especially to the executive branch. We've seen time and time again, especially during the pandemic, as they ran away from those FOIA requests. Why do you think that a lot of other people have championed this kind of approach with FOIA requests? Not a lot of people talk about it, but you have.
Yeah, I mean, for me, and this was an issue that I didn't believe, enough out there we're talking about. I mean, listen, man, I truly believe that if we in Michigan, and listen, I don't want to just make Michigan a growth state again. I want us to be one of the top 10 states in the entire country. Okay. And I've always been a firm believer that the most effective, the most efficient, whether it be government, businesses, what have you, there's accountability, man. So I wanted to make government accountability one of the biggest issues that we plan to tackle when I'm the state's next governor. And we've been really pushing it on the campaign trail. So it's threefold. You mentioned FOIA. So Michigan is one of, I believe, 5 states in the entire nation. You don't have access to the executive's records. That is crazy. Okay. We passed that when I was in the House to ensure that and also the legislature, you don't have access to the legislature's records. Okay. We passed legislation to ensure that was changed. Unfortunately, the Senate killed it. But, you look at when I was speaker, one thing I was able to do, I ensured, and I got in hot water with a lot of my team members and staffers. They didn't like it, but I said, you know what? On day one, anybody that is employed by the House of Representatives, your name, your title, and your salary is going online for the entire world to see. A lot of them didn't like that. And I said, listen, you work for the taxpayers. You work for the citizens of the state. They have a right to know what you're making. If you don't like it, go into the private sector. That's what you do, but you don't work for the taxpayers if you don't like that. So, open records, that's number one. But number two, we talked about the budget process. I left the legislature. The state budget was $59 billion. It's now $83 billion, a 40% increase. I haven't talked to anybody that's gotten a 40% increase in the private sector over the past 6 or 7 years. Okay. So accountability, let's go back to zero-based budgeting. So anybody that doesn't know what that means, typically every year what happens is with the budget, the governor just introduces a budget and they start from where the last budget left off. Okay. This has happened for years. Let's go in. Let's start from zero. You want to talk about accountability. Imagine a governor and a department head. They had to go into the legislature and they had to justify every single line item that was going to go into that budget because they had zeroed it out. So let's do zero-based budgeting. When I talk about accountability, I'm talking about me. I'm talking about the executive. I'm talking about my department heads. But the last thing I'd love to see us do, I've said, the one line item, I'm going to promise I'm going to go in. It's the one line item I can guarantee I'm going to go in and I'm going to advocate for a large increase. And it is the Office of Auditor General. The Auditor General is the nonpartisan department in the state, and they are essentially the investigators on the ground. Okay. So they're the ones that investigate department heads for efficiencies, programs. Are they working? So I'll give you a couple examples. It was the Auditor General that discovered that this governor had sent $10 billion out in unemployment benefits to people during COVID that didn't deserve them. Okay. It was the auditor general that found that this governor had misreported nursing home deaths by 40%. Okay. They are the eyes and ears on the ground. Let's talk, sports analogies for a minute. I know you're a football guy. Okay. I was not as athletic as you. I didn't get to play college football, but I played high school football. Okay. What I can tell you is on a Friday, if we knew we were going to play an inferior team, we didn't bring our A game at practice that week. And you probably experienced the same thing. Guys would show up late. They'd go through the motions because you know what? They knew if they fumbled on Friday or Saturday, they were just going to be able to pick it up and run down and score because they were playing an inferior team. But when you got to the playoffs, you knew you had to bring your A game every single day because if you fumbled, that team was going to pick it up and they were going to score a touchdown on you. I said, you know what? Let's double the budget of the Office of Auditor General. Let's double the number of investigators on the ground so that when I become governor, me and my department heads every single day, we've got to bring our A game because we know if we fumble, there's going to be an investigator on the ground that's going to be able to do an investigation and publicly demonstrate how ineffective or how inefficient we were.
That sounds like you're going to Doge Michigan.
Absolutely. And you can, but there's ways of doging Michigan without having to doge it, if you get what I'm saying. I mean, listen,
absolutely.
You look at that budget process, and that's what's funny. You hear people say, we're going to doge the budget. We're going to go through and find inefficiencies. You don't have to go through it and find inefficiencies. Just start from zero. Instead of trying to go through every line item to determine whether or not that is, that program is inefficient or whether or not it's effective, instead put the burden on the executive. Put the burden on the executive. Don't put the burden on the legislature to prove that it's an ineffective program. Instead, put the burden on the executive to prove that it is. So that's how you doge it. Start from zero and make them justify every single line item that's going into that budget, man.
And I know the people would love that. I mean, that's what they want is accountability, right?
Yep.
We have to rebuild trust in our government, and it's going to have to start with some integrity people, obviously, getting in office and following through with everything that they're saying. That's why, just like you, I like these long podcasts because you can get into depth. They're just not talking points. Let's get into some deep waters here. And then it's accountability time several years from now. If you're Michigan's next governor, I'm like, well, Tom, you talked about eliminating implicit bias training. Hey, man, you still haven't done it, right? You said it back then.
Yeah.
Let me move on to the elephant in the room in every campaign. And you mentioned Gary Glenn, and I have a great story with Gary Glenn. Love that guy. God rest him.
Yeah.
I was at an event, Midland area, right? And obviously in my run for governor, we could draw big crowds. We could draw big crowds. We would draw anywhere on average 200 to 300, even sometimes thousands of people. And Gary came to one of my events, and he was just loving what I had to say. I mean, I was on fire that night. I was inspiring the crowd, which I'm pretty good at. And he comes up to me afterwards and said, Garrett, that was fantastic. You gave me the chills. I'm motivated. I want to get involved. He said, well, let me ask you this question. And he fed me some humble pie because look at all the people here, he said. He's like,
Gary would do that.
Yes, he did. And he did it in a very tactful way without calling you out, right? And he said, hey, there's about 300 to 500 people here tonight. They're all fired up. He said, how many of these events can you do throughout the state? And I did some numbers in my head. And it came down, long story short, that I was going to be able to probably get in front of maybe 50 to 60,000 people. Okay. And he said, how many do you need to win? I said, well over 2 million. He's like, exactly. Fundraising, right? And that conversation with Gary really just built a synapse in my mind of, I don't care how great you think you are, how great a policy, how good of a speaker are. If you can't get your message out to the masses, you don't have a snowball chance in Hades to win this thing. Yeah. We found out, obviously, you know this, John James has got a war chest with one of the DeVos family members donating $5 million to him. Ronna McDaniels and Shane Wallace, I think, are starting to pack. Rumor is it before they started this pack that they were building this pack to support John James. Brandon Hall broke that story. Now they changed their narrative that they're building this pack to help all Republican candidates. We'll see. But obviously, John James has a lot of name recognition. And John is the only candidate who has not come on my show and had a very lengthy conversation about his platform. I'm still waiting for his team to reach out and say he wants to come on and do a 45-minute live and have a conversation with we the people. I think is very important. But how are you going to compete with that, Tom? You got John, that great name recognition. He's going to be 30-40% polling just with that. How do you get through that barrier? What needs to happen in your campaign? How much money do you have in the war chest right now? Do you have any left over from your previous runs?
Yep. So we rolled over. We had about, I think it was, and don't quote me on exact numbers, I think it was around 540,000. Okay.
Yeah, great.
In fundraising has gone well over the last week. What I would say is this. So a couple things. Number one, I've always had a history of being able to raise dollars. I mean, when I was House Speaker at the time, we raised, I think it was $8.6 million that cycle, and that was a record at the time. Okay. When I ran for AG in 18, I think it was 2.6 or 2.7 million. Okay. Again, my numbers might be a little off here, but I'll say this. We've always been able to raise the money that we need to get our message out. Okay. I went into this with eyes wide open, knowing that there was a very good chance, at least in the primary, we were not going to be able to match, at least one of the candidates, dollar for dollar, but we were going to be able to raise enough to get our message out. That's number one. And we've got a track record of that. But number two, Garrett, as you know as well as I do, yes, you just mentioned the funding, and that's the Air Force, if you will, of our system. You've got to have a strong Air Force, okay? But I'll also say this: you can't win with an Air Force alone. You better have an army of volunteers. You better have folks. There you go. You got to have both, man. So we're gonna, and I've been very clear to my team, we've got to build a grassroots army as well, or we're not going to be successful, or nobody's going to. It doesn't matter who gets through this primary. If it's just with a lot of money and they don't have enthusiasm, they don't have an army behind them next November, it's going to be very, very difficult to win. So we've got the ground game. But number three, we've got to have the right message, and we can't be afraid to take it anywhere in the state or talk to anybody about it. And I believe we've got a great message. I mean, as the president showed us, okay, and I want to be very clear. I always tell this to people. Donald Trump is the Michael Jordan of Republican politics. Okay. That guy for 25 years, professional basketball, has tried to find the next Michael Jordan. I wish they'd stop. It's never going to happen. All right. Same thing with our president. Okay. The good Lord threw out the mold when he made him. So there's never going to be another one. So anytime I bring up these comparisons, obviously he's in a class to his own. But the one thing I'll say is this: in 16 and in 16, and then in this last election cycle, he was outspent. But he was not afraid. He had that grassroots army. He struck a nerve with the American electorate. He was discussing, he was talking the right issues, but you notice he was not afraid to take that message anywhere. So that's what I've got to do, or that's what anybody's got to do if they really want to win is, you've got to raise the funds necessary to get your message out. Check. We will do that. You've got to build an army. But number three, you've got to have the right message. You've got to have something people actually want to buy, something that's resonating, that they're going to listen to. But then you can't be afraid to take it anywhere across the state. That's how we're going to win this thing.
Yeah, and social media and podcasters like myself have changed that kind of landscape. Consultants don't like to hear this, and we can talk a whole other show on consultants, right? I think how this game has gotten out of control with the candidates announcing a year and a half, 2 years out in advance, as the consultants just continue to rack up their bill, as they say. They don't make a lot of money on social media because there's no points to be had. And social media is going to change the game. The number of people this election cycle, we're going to see a shift. The majority of the voting base gets their news not on corporate media anymore. It's social media, it's podcast, and everything else. And you're exactly right. You can trump, as we say, the fundraising of another candidate if you get on these shows, have long conversations, and like what I'm going to do for you is push this out and let everyone know what your policy, what you stand on. That's going to be my role.
Thank you.
But how much do you think you need in the primary, let's say, money-wise? What would be a great number? Like, if I got this number, we got it. What is that?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I hate this early in the game. It's tough to put an actual number on it. Just because we don't know how much the other candidates are going to raise or some of the unforeseen circumstances. Okay. What I would say is, I think if history if history is any indicator, I mean, there have been candidates that have won primaries in the state with 3.5 to 4 million, and some of them have had to spend 7 or 8 million. Okay. So I know that's a pretty wide gulf, but it's going to probably be somewhere in between that, depending on who all gets in the race, how much money they spend, or how much others are able to raise, or the ground game. I mean, listen, you just, mentioned somebody with a $5 million check. Imagine if that same person had an army of thousands of volunteers across the state. It makes that person that much more difficult to defeat. So, I guess the jury's out on how much we will need. What I can say is we've always had a track record to be able to get our message out. That's what we got to do.
And speaking to that, that's what I wish would have happened, is if we would have just got everybody in a room, right? And in our little society in our head is like, all right, you shouldn't be running, you shouldn't be running, you shouldn't be running, you need to be running. Or if there's like a clear winner, like a Trump of the group, run and let's focus on the general and not have to worry about the primary. But it looks like there will be some mudslinging in this primary, unfortunately, which we kind of eat our own in this game. But I'm hoping that we don't beat ourselves up so bad that we don't have enough in the tank, because as you're well aware of, it's our primary in August and then the general is 3 months later. I mean, I really, really need to kick that back. And another thing I wanted to ask you, I just lost it in my head that I wanted to talk to you about, but Mike Rogers, that's what it is. Mike Rogers he had a great ground game in his last race, and it looks like he has repeated that. So it's going to be interesting if there's any other people that get into that race. There's rumors, right? There's still some rumors of people getting into that. So it will be interesting how that goes. Kevin Rinke has also been on record. I've been with Kevin over the past couple of years doing the Trump Force 47. I've gotten to know Kevin. I like Kevin. I like Kevin's policies. He has been on record saying that if he found someone else that was more qualified, that was going to be better than him as governor, he would not run in this race, and he would actually get behind that candidate. What differentiates you from him? And if I'm Kevin, what are you going to say to me to say, Kevin, I got this?
Yeah. So, it's very difficult to, compare yourself to every candidate that's running. What I would say is just look at me and my record. I mean, I think it's clear. Anybody that's watched this podcast over the last, 40 minutes or however long we've been on for, I think it's clear I've got a passion to govern. We've got the right ideas to turn this state around, but also the track record. And what I'd say is, that doesn't mean that a Kevin Rinke couldn't be a great governor. That doesn't mean he wouldn't be able to get it done. But I have a history in the legislature of tackling big issues and getting them across the finish line. So again, that's not a knock on anybody else. It's just a track record that I've been able to have because I've had to manage a chamber. I've had to deal with a governor and a Senate majority leader and get big ticket items across the finish line. So I'd say, look at the track record, look at the history.
Very good. I'm going to end on this because we're at 48 minutes. Thank you for your time, by the way. I really appreciate
it. And I don't know how quickly you got to run, but there is, and I'll answer this question for sure, but there is one story. It'll probably take me about 2.5 minutes to tell. I'd love to tell before we get off.
We can talk another 15 minutes, baby.
Okay. You go to your question, then I'll tell the story, but I've been fun. This is good. This time's gone quick, man.
Okay. Obviously we talked about a crowded primary. This is for the grassroots folks out there.
Yep. And I got to plug my laptop in. Sorry, realized I didn't have it plugged in and she was going dead. Okay, go ahead.
Don't be denying the grassroots their love now.
No, I'm not doing that. There you go.
What do you say to the grassroots folks out there? They're very passionate, and like you said, they will give the shirt off their back to support you if you win their hearts and minds. What would you like to say to them? Because so many times folks have talked a good game, saying they're going to govern this way and they're going to legislate this way, but they turn really moderate once they get elected. What do you say to those folks? What's going to make you different, Tom?
I'd say you've got somebody here with a track record, man. When I was in the legislature, I was voted by the American Conservative Union nationwide as one of the top 30 rising stars under the age of 30. Okay. I mentioned the one legislative leader that was not afraid to pass constitutional carry out of our chamber, was not afraid to take on English as the official language of our state. And we mentioned Gary Glenn. God bless him. I wish he was still here. I mean, he was one of my biggest backers again, not being afraid to appoint somebody like him to be the energy chair. I mean, a lot of people would have looked at that and said, I can't do this. This is going to be a sticky wicket. There's going to be too many problems. So I've got a history of standing up for the grassroots, but again, also being able to take, and those are winning issues, don't get me wrong, but also taking a whole host of winning issues, mental health reform, teacher pension reform. I mentioned the driver responsibility fees. I mean, imagine somebody, when I was in Flint and I was working in this, in an urban area, I can't tell you how many young men and women came to me and they were just in tears. And they said, sir, I've got no hope, man. I'm busting tables for $11 an hour and I can't pay $20,000 in fees. Imagine having the candidate that can go into those urban areas and look those people in the eyes and say, hey, who didn't have a driver's license 7 years ago and who has one now? It's because I went to war for you. So we're going to be the one candidate. Again, we've got the conservative vision. We've got the street cred. We've got a past history of results, but we're also going to be able to go anywhere with this message, which I love.
Spot on. What was your story?
So, I wanted to tell this because I believe this story gives a great insight to me, who I am, how I view the world, and how I be as the next governor. It's a story that I tell from my prosecution days, and some had heard this on the AG trail, but when I'm out there and I talk about being a prosecutor, sometimes you're with family, people, they're very intrigued by the profession. Like, well, tell me about your biggest case. Tell me about the worst guy that you put in jail, or what did he do? And there were a lot of those, Garrett. But the biggest case and the most memorable case that I worked on wasn't a case where we put somebody in prison. It was actually where we got somebody out. And I drew this case. The warrant had been authorized. I showed up to the courtroom, and this young man, I believe he was 17 years old. He had been charged as an adult. He had shot these other 3 young men with one of those high-powered pellet guns on the north end of Flint at a bus stop. And he was charged with 3 10-year felonies, assault with intent to do great bodily harm less than murder. I show up to the case, and his defense attorney, he comes to me, he says, Tom, and I couldn't do this unless the attorney gave me permission, but he says, I want you to go back there, if you would, to the holding cell. I'm not going to tell you what to do or what to ask. I just want you to spend some time with this young man. So I walk back there. Me and this young man, we spent an hour in that holding cell. And this poor kid is just crying, Garrett. And he's telling me, he's saying, sir, everything that is written in that police report is 100% accurate. I can't fight back against it. I can't push back. Here's the problem. What that police report doesn't show is that what I did was in self-defense. And I don't know what I'm going to do because it's 3 voices against 1. And I'm on my way to prison for up to 10 years. My life's going to be ruined, and I don't know what to do. For some reason in my heart, and there's just certain things, man, in your heart, you just know it. I believed this young man, but I didn't know what to do. I walked out, and I told his attorney, I said, let's get a couple-day adjournment. I went to my officer in charge, and I said, listen, Rod, I said, it's going to be a leap of faith, man. I want you to go to that bus stop, and I want to know if there was any surveillance that was taken that day. Let's see if there's some other evidence we can pull up. A few hours later, my officer in charge came in, and this was back in 2007 when surveillance still had DVDs. Yeah. He walked, and he says, man, you ain't going to believe this, Tom. We popped in, and he said this thing was within hours of resetting. And it was everything that young man said it was.
Wow.
And we were able to get that young man out of jail immediately. We had the other 3. They were arrested for falsifying a police report. And what I would say is this. That young man, what he needed was for somebody to come back there, listen to his problem, identify a solution, and work as a team to get it fixed. And as I travel the state, that's what I hear from a lot of people. They're at their wits' end. They don't know what to do with their education system, higher taxes, not getting pay raises. They're just at their wits' end. And what they want is for somebody to just listen to them, identify the problems, but then work as a team to get something done to turn the state around. So that story, that's exactly how I plan to operate as the state's next governor. We're going to listen. We're going to identify problems. We're going to bring real solutions. But again, we're going to work as a team to get this done. Anybody that's campaigning, that's going to stand there and say, wait till you let me, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. Again, they're not being truthful to themselves or the people they want to represent. We got to do this as a team. We can turn the state around. We can do it. It's going to take a lot of hard work and grit, but I look forward to the task at hand.
Awesome. Great story. Great closing, by the way. Again, thank you so much for your time to coming on here and just having a conversation. I don't know why some people out there are so afraid of just having a conversation. I was fair, wasn't I, Tom?
Absolutely. This has been fun. This is what it's all about. I don't know how many people watched it, but I hope it was a ton.
You'll circulate as we cut this bad boy up. Several 100,000 views will see this on average with these shows. So it's good. And that's what needs to happen. And that's what I'll continue to do, is just give the movement of folks just as much up-to-date, accurate, and truthful information I can so they can be empowered with their decisions. That's why I'm not a big fan of endorsements. I just don't like endorsements. I want the people to do their own due diligence. I want the people to vet their own candidates. Who cares who Garrett supports? Who cares what anyone else supports? Do your own due diligence. That's how we get good quality candidates in there to do exactly what you said. And you know this as a public servant. You've been in the arena many times. It's listening. And then it's figuring out what we need to do, having a plan, having a vision, like you said, and then execute it. And that's all we can ask as we the people. Tom, thank you so much for your time, sir.
Thank you, my friend. Appreciate it. You have a great day, okay?
Yes, sir. Bye-bye. Great interview. Again, John James, calling John James. That's what it's going to be like. You don't have to be afraid to come on the Grassroots Army Podcast. We are just going to talk about what you're going to bring to the table. And as of right now, every single candidate who has announced has been on the show and had a conversation with we the people. John, do not hide in the basement. Do not hide in the basement for we the people. Get yourself out there. Have a conversation with us. Do not want the hashtag basement Johnny to start trending. Okay. We just want to know what you stand for, what you're willing to do, and we'll go from there. Before I go, I have to give a shout out to my man, Dave Garr, who has been fighting alongside us for many years. He has a limousine service in the east side of Michigan, a Dream Limousine and Sedan serving Southeast Michigan for over 20 years with late model sedans, SUVs, vans, limos, and party buses. Sounds like a good time, Dave. Up to 40 passenger capacity. Holy cow. How many can we get on the 40 passenger capacity bus, Dave, as the Grassroots Army to go around and see the city of Detroit or maybe catch a Lions game? How fun would that be, folks? He's featuring award-winning celebrity Greg Russell. This is a gentleman from WDIV, WJR. Guided tours of Detroit, complete with sub sandwiches, my stomach's growling, and complete with Detroit's own better made potato chips. A Dream Limousine and Sedan, any party, any size, anytime. www.adreamlimo.com. The phone number that you can reach his business is 734-542-6800. If you didn't catch all that, guess what? It is in the description, folks. The website, the phone number. If you're in Southeast Michigan and you want a fantastic gentleman who is a patriot to drive you around your party, a 40, or anything smaller in SUVs, vans, and limos, give him a call. He's a great human being. So hopefully John James's team will get a hold of me. You know where I'm at. Come on, John. Come on. Let's have a conversation. Let's move this state and country forward together as we the people. Have a great day, everyone. God bless you. God bless the state of Michigan, of course, and always God bless these United States. Until next time.